There comes a quiet moment in every life when the noise becomes heavier than the silence. A moment when you realize how much of your energy has been spent explaining, justifying, defending, softening your truth so it might be accepted. You feel it in your chest first, a subtle tightness, a tiredness that sleep does not cure. It is the exhaustion of carrying words that were never meant to be carried. You replay conversations in your mind, wondering how else you could have said it, how you might have sounded calmer, clearer, more reasonable, and beneath all of that effort lives a simple ache, the desire to be understood. This is where the shift begins, not with anger, not with rebellion, but with awareness. There is a deep human instinct to explain ourselves, to make sure others see our intentions, our goodness, our logic. We fear being misread, misjudged, dismissed, so we speak, and speak again, and again. We offer context, history, reasons, hoping that clarity will buy us peace. Yet peace rarely comes from being understood by everyone. More often, it comes from understanding ourselves well enough to stop chasing approval. The Stoics understood this quiet struggle long before our modern world amplified it. Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself, not to the crowd. He knew that a mind anchored in its own values does not need constant external agreement. He observed that people will think what they think, speak what they speak, and act as they act, regardless of how perfectly you explain yourself. Their judgments are shaped by their own wounds, fears, expectations, and limitations. No explanation can fully cross that distance. When you stop explaining yourself, you are not becoming cold, you are becoming clear. At first it feels uncomfortable. Silence can feel like vulnerability. You may worry that others will misunderstand your quiet, that they will assume weakness, arrogance, indifference. But silence is not emptiness. It is restraint. It is emotional discipline. It is the strength to let your actions carry what words once tried to hold. Think of a mountain standing beneath changing skies. Storms do not ask the mountain to explain itself. Winds do not demand justification. The mountain does not shout its stability. It simply remains. And in that remaining, it teaches everything that needs to be known. When you explain yourself endlessly, you hand your inner balance to the reactions of others. You begin to live in response mode. But when you stop, something subtle and powerful happens. Your nervous system softens. Your breath deepens. You begin to act from alignment rather than defense. You realize that not every misunderstanding needs correction. Not every opinion needs a reply. Not every silence needs filling. Seneca once reflected that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Much of the urge to explain comes from imagined outcomes. We picture rejection, conflict, loss, so we rush to prevent pain that may never arrive. Yet in doing so, we often create a different kind of suffering, the loss of self-respect, the quiet resentment that comes from betraying our own boundaries for the comfort of others. Self-respect grows in stillness. It grows when you allow yourself to be misinterpreted without panic, when you choose dignity over persuasion, when you understand that your worth does not fluctuate with understanding. It is not negotiated, it is practiced. There is a deep patience required here, a patience with other people's confusion, a patience with your own discomfort. Stoicism does not ask you to suppress emotion, but to place it in its proper seat. Emotion may arise, but it does not steer. The steering belongs to reason, values, and long vision. When you stop explaining yourself, you create space. Space to observe, space to listen, space to notice who respects you without needing constant reassurance. You begin to see relationships more clearly. Some connections deepen, grounded in mutual respect rather than constant clarification. Others fade, revealing that they were sustained only by your effort to be understood. This is not loss. This is alignment. Modern life rewards noise. It rewards instant reactions, public opinions, constant visibility. But inner strength has never been loud. Resilience has always been quiet. Independence does not announce itself. It shows up as calm consistency, as measured responses, as the ability to stand alone without feeling abandoned. You may notice that when you stop explaining, conversations change. Some people lean in, others lean away. Both reactions are information. You are no longer performing clarity. You are living it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that a person's tranquility comes from within, not from external arrangements. When you internalize this, explanations lose their urgency. You begin to understand that clarity is not something you force into others, it is something you cultivate inside yourself. There is courage in this way of being, not the dramatic courage of confrontation, but the steady courage of restraint. The courage to let your values speak through time. The courage to trust that those who are meant to understand you will, without being chased. And here the shift deepens. You realize that explaining was never about communication alone. It was about control, the desire to control perception. When you release that, you release a heavy burden. You step back into your own rhythm. Your words become fewer, but more precise. Your silence becomes intentional, not empty. You begin to move through life with a different posture, less tense, less hurried, more grounded. You do what is right because it is right, not because it will be approved. You choose your battles carefully, knowing that peace is not found in winning every argument, but in not needing to fight them at all. If this video is creating an inner change within you, gently hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, comment "I will follow this in my life," and share this message with others who may need it. Now consider this. What if the greatest strength you could develop is not the ability to convince, but the ability to remain centered when you are not understood? What if your calm presence is more transformative than any explanation you could offer? This is where Stoic wisdom becomes deeply practical. In a world addicted to reaction, your composure becomes a quiet rebellion. When you stop explaining yourself, you are not withdrawing from life. You are entering it more fully, no longer fragmented by the need to be everywhere at once in other people's minds. You return to yourself, and from that return, everything begins to shift. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to hear something you may have ignored for a long time, your own inner voice. It is softer than the noise of opinions, but steadier. It does not rush. It does not beg to be accepted. It speaks in quiet certainty, and it grows stronger the more you listen to it. At first, this silence can feel unsettling. You may notice how often you used words to protect yourself, how explanations became a shield against judgment, rejection, or loneliness. Without that shield, you stand more exposed. And yet in this exposure, there is a surprising sense of relief. You are no longer performing, you are simply present. This is where emotional discipline begins to take root. The Stoics believed that freedom comes not from controlling the world, but from mastering your inner responses. When you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim that mastery. You no longer let other people's confusion dictate your emotional weather. You stop chasing agreement as proof of your worth. You begin to understand that peace is not something you negotiate with others, it is something you cultivate within. There is a powerful shift that happens in relationships at this stage. You may notice that some people become uncomfortable with your quiet. They were accustomed to your explanations because they benefited from your self-doubt. Your clarity disrupts that dynamic, not because you argue, but because you don't. You no longer feed every question, every challenge, every subtle demand for justification. This is not cruelty, it is self-respect. Self-respect does not shout. It does not defend itself endlessly. It sets boundaries with calm consistency. It understands that not everyone deserves access to your inner reasoning. Some people ask for explanations not to understand, but to debate, diminish, or delay your growth. When you recognize this, silence becomes wisdom rather than avoidance. Seneca wrote that a wise person is content with himself. This contentment does not come from isolation, but from inner sufficiency. When you are sufficient within yourself, you no longer need to prove who you are. Your life becomes your statement. Your conduct becomes your language. Notice how this changes your pace. You move more slowly, but with intention. You respond instead of react. You allow conversations to unfold without rushing to fill every pause. Silence becomes a space of strength rather than awkwardness. You realize that calmness unsettles those who rely on chaos. There is also grief here, a quiet grief for the version of yourself who tried so hard to be understood, who believed that if you could just find the right words, everything would be okay. Offer compassion to that version of you. They were doing their best with what they knew, but you are learning something deeper now. Understanding is not always mutual, and it does not need to be. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to conserve energy. Emotional energy is precious. The Stoics treated it as such. They believed that attention should be given only to what is within your control. Other people's opinions do not fall into that category. Your values do, your actions do, your integrity does. This shift brings resilience, not the brittle resilience of endurance at all costs, but the grounded resilience of inner stability. You stop being pulled apart by every external reaction. You become less reactive to praise and less wounded by criticism. Both begin to lose their grip when you stop measuring yourself through the eyes of others. There is a quiet independence that emerges here. You still care, you still connect, but you are no longer dependent. You no longer need constant validation to move forward. You choose your words carefully, knowing that silence often communicates more than explanations ever could. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the best revenge is not to be like the one who wronged you. In modern life, this can be understood as refusing to mirror chaos with chaos, defensiveness with defensiveness. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop participating in unnecessary emotional battles. You protect your inner order. This does not mean you never speak. It means you speak with intention. When words are needed, they are clear, brief, and grounded. When they are not, you allow silence to do its quiet work. You begin to trust that truth does not need constant reinforcement. It stands on its own. As you practice this, you may feel moments of doubt. Old habits resurface. The urge to clarify, correct, or convince returns. This is natural. Change is not linear. Each time you choose restraint over explanation, you strengthen a new inner muscle. Patience grows, confidence deepens. You also begin to notice something subtle but profound. People start responding to you differently. Some show more respect. Others reveal their insecurity. You no longer need to interpret these reactions deeply. You observe them, learn from them, and remain steady. This steadiness becomes your anchor in a restless world. While others rush to be heard, you choose to be grounded. While others explain themselves into exhaustion, you conserve your energy for what truly matters. Your life becomes less about being understood and more about being aligned, and alignment changes everything. If this video is creating an inner change within you, gently hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, comment "I will follow this in my life," and share this message with others who may need it. Now let this question rest with you. What would your life feel like if you trusted yourself enough to let your actions speak? What if your silence was not a withdrawal, but a declaration of inner stability? This is where the deeper courage begins to form. Not the courage to argue, but the courage to stand quietly in your truth, allowing time to reveal what words never could. In this space, patience becomes natural. You no longer rush outcomes. You allow misunderstandings to pass without chasing them. You recognize that clarity unfolds over time, and those meant to see you clearly will do so without force. This is the calm power of Stoic living in the modern world. And as you continue, the shift grows stronger, more natural, more deeply rooted in who you are becoming. As you remain in this quiet practice of not explaining yourself, something deeper begins to change. It is not visible at first. There is no dramatic announcement, no sudden recognition from the world. Instead, the change happens beneath the surface, like roots growing stronger in the dark. You begin to trust your own ground. This trust is not arrogance. It is not indifference. It is a settled knowing that your inner compass does not need constant calibration from outside voices. You stop checking yourself against every reaction. You stop scanning faces for approval. You stop rehearsing responses before anyone has even questioned you. Your mind grows quieter, not because life has become easier, but because you have become steadier. This is emotional maturity taking form. The Stoics spoke often about living in accordance with nature, not the external world alone, but your inner nature, your values, your reason, your character. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to live more in alignment with this inner nature. You no longer twist yourself into shapes that make others comfortable. You allow yourself to stand as you are, even if that stance is misunderstood. There is a loneliness that can arise here, a subtle one, the loneliness of no longer oversharing your inner world. the loneliness of realizing that not everyone can meet you where you are. This loneliness is not a punishment, it is a transition, a shedding of false closeness that was built on constant explanation rather than genuine understanding. And in this space, resilience deepens. Resilience is often misunderstood as toughness, as pushing through without feeling, but Stoic resilience is different. It is the ability to feel fully without being ruled by feeling. When you stop explaining yourself, you feel disappointment without collapsing into it. You feel frustration without letting it spill into unnecessary words. You feel sadness without needing to justify it. This emotional containment is not repression, it is choice. Seneca reminded us that the mind that is anxious about the future or wounded by the past is rarely at peace. The need to explain often comes from this anxiety. We explain to secure outcomes. We explain to prevent misunderstanding. We explain to rewrite the past. But peace arrives when we accept that some things unfold beyond our control. When you stop explaining yourself, you accept uncertainty with grace. You allow others to hold their interpretations. You allow events to settle without interference. You stop trying to manage every narrative, and in doing so, you reclaim your inner time and energy. There is dignity in this restraint. You may notice that your words become fewer, but more meaningful. When you do speak, you speak from clarity, not urgency, from presence, not defense. People begin to listen differently, not because you demand attention, but because your silence has weight. You no longer chase being heard, you allow being felt. This is where self-respect becomes embodied. Self-respect is not a thought, it is a posture, a way of moving through the world without apology for existing, without constant explanation for your choices. You choose what aligns with your values, and you allow the consequences to follow. This does not make you reckless, it makes you responsible in the deepest sense. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that it is not what happens to us, but how we respond that defines us. Stopping explanation is a response that says, I trust my actions, I trust my values, I trust time. Time becomes an ally here. When you are no longer in a hurry to be understood, time does the clarifying work for you. Patterns emerge. Consistency reveals truth. Those who doubted may come to understand. Those who never do slowly fade into the background of your life. You are no longer pulled toward them. You remain centered. There is also a growing sense of inner freedom. Freedom from the pressure to perform emotionally. Freedom from carrying other people's discomfort. Freedom from correcting every assumption. This freedom feels like spaciousness inside your chest, like breathing more deeply without effort. You begin to realize how much of your life was spent explaining what could have been lived quietly. You forgive yourself for that. You were learning. Now you are practicing something new. This practice strengthens your independence, not isolation, but independence of spirit. You connect without losing yourself. You engage without dissolving your boundaries. You offer presence without offering explanations that drain you. In modern life, where everything is immediate and reactive, this way of being is rare, and rarity has its own gravity. People sense it. They may not name it, but they feel it. Your calm becomes a reference point. Your steadiness becomes a silent invitation. There will still be moments when you choose to explain. Stoicism is not rigidity. It is wisdom applied with discernment. You explain when clarity serves growth, not when it serves fear. You speak when silence would harm, not when silence protects your ego. The difference is subtle, but it is everything. And slowly something beautiful happens. You begin to experience peace not as an absence of conflict, but as an inner agreement with yourself. You are no longer split between who you are and who you are trying to be for others. You are whole. If this video is creating an inner change within you, gently hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, comment I will follow this in my life, and share this message with others who may need it. Now allow a new question to settle gently within you. What kind of strength would you develop if you trusted silence as much as you once trusted explanation? What kind of life might unfold if you no longer felt responsible for managing how others see you? This is where Stoic courage becomes deeply personal. Not loud, not defiant, but quietly unshakable. From here, the path continues inward, toward patience that does not rush outcomes, toward confidence that does not demand recognition, toward a calm that remains even when misunderstood. And as you continue walking this path, you will notice that the shift is no longer something you think about. It becomes something you live. As this way of being settles into your daily life, you begin to notice how often silence protects what is sacred within you. Not everything needs to be exposed to be real. Not everything needs commentary to have meaning. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to treat your inner world with reverence. You realize that constant explanation is a form of leakage, a slow draining of energy that was meant to nourish your own growth. This is where patience becomes more than a concept. It becomes a lived experience. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that tranquility comes from doing what is right and accepting the rest. When you stop explaining yourself, you practice this acceptance daily. You accept that not everyone will agree. You accept that misunderstandings may linger. You accept that your path is yours alone to walk. This acceptance brings courage, the courage to stand alone without feeling isolated, the courage to be misunderstood without becoming defensive, the courage to trust that your life, lived with integrity, speaks more loudly than any explanation ever could. In modern environments, this courage is tested often. At work, in relationships, in public spaces where opinions move quickly and judgments form instantly. Each time you resist the urge to over-explain, you reinforce your inner stability. You remind yourself that urgency is not truth, noise is not clarity. You also begin to experience a deeper connection with yourself. Without constant outward justification, your attention turns inward. You reflect more. You listen more closely to your intuition. You become aware of subtle signals from your body and mind: fatigue, calm, alignment, resistance. These signals guide you more accurately than external approval ever did. There is a quiet joy in this self-connection, not excitement, but contentment, not validation, but peace. You realize that you no longer need to be everywhere at once. You no longer need to manage every perception. You are enough as you are, in this moment. And from this place, compassion deepens. When you stop explaining yourself, you also stop demanding explanations from others. You allow people to be where they are. You listen without trying to fix. You observe without rushing to judge. Your patience with yourself extends naturally to patience with the world. This is how inner discipline transforms relationships. Not by control, but by calm presence. Not by persuasion, but by steadiness. If this video is creating an inner change within you, gently hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, comment "I will follow this in my life," and share this message with others who may need it. Now let a new reflection arise gently. What if your greatest contribution to the world is not your explanations but your example? What if your calm, your restraint, your quiet integrity offer others permission to slow down as well? This is where Stoic philosophy quietly reshapes modern life, not through lectures but through lived simplicity. As you continue, you may notice that the urge to explain still visits you. Old habits do not disappear overnight. When it does, meet it with kindness rather than resistance. Pause, breathe. Ask yourself whether speaking will serve truth or merely soothe discomfort. Over time, this pause becomes natural, and in that pause, everything continues to shift. Your life feels less crowded. Your thoughts feel less tangled. Your presence feels more grounded. You are no longer defined by how well you can articulate yourself under pressure. You are defined by how steadily you live your values, even in silence. This is the strength that endures, and it prepares you for the final integration of this wisdom, where calm becomes not just a practice, but a way of life. As this way of living integrates fully, something beautiful happens. You begin to respect others more deeply. You no longer need to control how they see you, and so you stop trying to control them. You allow people to be who they are. You meet them with calm clarity. You listen without absorbing what does not belong to you. This mutual freedom creates healthier boundaries, healthier relationships, healthier inner dialogue. If this video is creating an inner change within you, gently hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, comment "I will follow this in my life," and share this message with others who may need it. Now let everything you have heard settle gently. There is no rush to apply it perfectly. Stoic wisdom was never about perfection. It was about practice, about returning, again and again, to what matters. When you stop explaining yourself, everything shifts because you return to yourself. You reclaim your time, your energy, your dignity. You stop living in reaction and start living in alignment. You breathe more deeply. You stand more steadily. You speak less, but with greater truth. In a noisy world, your calm becomes a sanctuary, for yourself first, and quietly, for others too. Carry this with you, not as a rule, but as a reminder. You do not owe everyone an explanation. You owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself the courage to live quietly, firmly, and with integrity. And in that courage, everything continues to shift.